Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I'll be presenting a new topic on leadership, and we will start with leadership defined. So again, this is Herminio, and if you're new to this channel, I would like to invite you to like, subscribe, comment, and hit the notification bell and choose all for you to get notified on our next and future presentations. So shall we start? Most of the information of this presentation was taken from the book of Peter G. Northhouse on Leadership Theory and Practice, the 7th edition. So according to Peter G. Northhouse, leadership is a process whereby an individual influences a group of individuals to achieve a common goal. Take note of the terms here: process, individual, influences, groups, and the achievement of common goal. Take note of this because these are the fundamental elements of leadership. Now, there's another definition that I'd like to show you. This is by John P. Cotter. John P. Cotter is a longtime professor of leadership change management in Harvard Business School. So according to him, leadership is most fundamentally about changes. Take note of that. He thinks that and in his research that leadership really is about change management, and changing the organizational structure, changing how the organization tries to achieve his goals. That is how Cotter tries to think of when it comes to leadership. According to him, leaders do is create the systems and organizations that managers need. Take note of that: creation, organization. He as a leader for change, you have to create systems for the managers, and eventually elevate them up to a whole new level, or change in some basic ways to take advantage of new opportunities. So the very reason why you need to implement these changes is, according to Cotter, it will be to take advantage of the new opportunities within or the entire environment where the organization is in. Now, according to Peter G. Northhouse, there is an evolution of leadership definition or concepts. The leadership thought throughout the 19th century up to the 21st century. And scholars cannot agree that there is no common definition of leadership. They cannot agree on a single definition of leadership. So throughout the years from 1900s to the 21st century, this is how the definition of leadership is growing. There is so much variance when it comes to the definition, concepts, and how scholars think about leadership. So in 1900s to 1929, the emphasis on control and centralization of power with common theme of domination. So for example, at a conference on leadership in 1927, leadership was defined as, quote unquote, the ability to impress the will of leader on those lead and induce obedience, respect, loyalty, and cooperation. That is according to Moore in 1927, page 124 in his book. Now, take note of this. The common theme is domination. Leaders demand for obedience, respect, loyalty, and cooperation. But it doesn't mean that if it is only during this time, it has no meaning at all in our present time. There are still leaders who thought this way, who really demand for power, their demand for respect and obedience, not just by persuading people, but coercively soliciting this obedience. They want to rule and dominate. Now, in 1930s, the traits became the focus of defining leadership, with an emerging view of leadership as influence rather than domination. Leadership was also identified as the interaction of individuals' specific personality traits with those of group. It was noted that while the attitudes and activities of the many may be changed by the one or the leader, the many may also influence the leader. So take note of this. In the 1930s, leadership is on influence, how leaders could influence the group. At the same time, there is a mutual reaction. The group also, the many, could also influence the leader at the same time. Now, in 1940s, the group approach came into the forefront, with leadership being defined as the behavior of an individual while involved in directing group activities. This is according to Hippel in 1949. At the same time, leadership by persuasion was distinguished from drivership or leadership by coercion, which is most common in the 1900s to 1929. That's according to Copland 1942. Now, in 1950s, there are three themes dominated leadership definitions during this period. Now, accordingly, continuance of group theory, leadership as a relationship that develops shared goals, effectiveness, and then accordingly, continuance of group theory, which frame leadership as what leaders do in groups. Take note of this, what leaders do in groups. Now, and the second theme is on leadership as a relationship that develops shared goals. Now here, which define leadership based on the behavior of a leader. So first is on what leaders can do. Here is how leaders behave, and lastly, effectiveness, in which leadership was defined by the ability to influence overall group effectiveness. So this is about influence now, how a certain leader could influence and the effectiveness of a certain group. Now, in 1960s, although this year is quite a chaotic year, decade, it is a tumultuous time in world affairs, where during this time the Russians and the United States is having a Cold War, and amongst leadership scholars, for them this is not a very good time in the period of the entire century. So this is the decade where the two great powers are in a Cold War. So the prevailing definition of leadership as behavior that influences people towards shared goals. This is how they define leadership. So for them, it is the behavior that influences people towards shared goals. So take note of this. The idea of a leader as an influencer that started in 1930s are still echoing, recurring up to this time. According to Seaman 1960, who described leadership as acts by persons which influence other persons in shared direction. So take note for that. Now, in 1970s, a group focus gave way to the organizational behavior approach, where leadership became viewed as initiating and maintaining groups or organizations to accomplish group or organizational goals. This according to Rost in 1991 and in Burns 1978. For Burns, the definition, however, was the most important concept of leadership to emerge. Leadership is the reciprocal process of mobilizing persons with certain motives and values. Take note of that, reciprocal process of mobilizing someone else. And with certain values, motives, various economic, political, and other resources in the context of competition and conflict, in order to realize goals independently or mutually held by both leaders and followers. That's in page 425 of the book of Verbs. Now, in the 1980s, this decade exploded with scholarly and popular works on the nature of leadership. This is the year where leadership are being studied a lot in the areas of in the areas of academic and also in public consciousness. So for Northhouse, this is the apex of the studies on the topics of leadership and the nature of leadership. So as a result, the number of definitions for leadership became prolific too, with several persevering themes, such as number one, do as the leader wishes. Second, influence. Third, threats. And then four, transformation. So what are these? Now, do as the leader wishes, leadership definition still predominantly delivered the message that leadership is getting followers to do what the leader wants done. Second, influence, probably the most often used word in leadership definition. Take note, it started in 1930s and it continues even in 1980s. The word influence was examined from every angle in an effort to distinguish leadership from management. However, scholars insisted that leadership is a non-coercive influence. Take note of that. And third, traits, sparred by the national bestseller In Search of Excellence by Peter and Waterman in 1982. This is one of the most famous books when it comes to managing, quality management, TQM and others. Competitive Strategy. This is the book of Tom Peters and Waterman. Now, the leadership as excellence movement brought leader traits back to the spotlight. As a result, many people's understanding of leadership is based on trait orientation. Transformation, according to Burns in 1978, is credited for initiating a movement defining leadership that occurs, leadership which is transformational, stating that leadership occurs when one or more persons engage with others in such a way that leaders, followers, raise one another to higher level of motivation and morality. Now, in the 21st century, let's jump to the 21st century. Now, in the 21st century, debate continues as to whether leadership and management are separate processes, but emerging research emphasizes the process of leadership whereby an individual influences a group of individuals to achieve a common goal rather than developing new ways of defining leadership. Among these emerging leadership approaches are: one, authentic leadership, spiritual leadership, servant, and adaptive leadership. So what are each of these? Authentic leadership, in which authenticity of leaders and their leadership is emphasized. For spiritual leadership, which focuses on leadership that utilizes values and a sense of calling and membership to motivate followers. Yeah? As a man of the 21st century, I was born in the 20th century, and I became a college student in the 21st century. I'm started working in a corporate world in the 21st century. These are the kind of leadership that I was oriented into: authentic leadership, spiritual leadership, servant leadership, and adaptive leadership. Now, servant leadership, which puts the leader in the role of servant, who utilizes caring principles to focus on followers' needs to help these followers become more autonomous, knowledgeable, like servant themselves. And adaptive leadership, in which leader encourages followers to adapt by confronting and solving problems, challenges, and changes. So you see here, leadership is somewhat like has the shoes of their followers. Now, conceptualizing leadership, there are six when we try to conceptualize leadership. One is focus of group processes. Take note of this. So when you try to think of leadership, there is an idea that we need to go into group processes, study the areas of group processes. Then it is an act or a behavior. We go also into the studies of as an act and behavior, as in the personality perspective, as we discussed a while ago, that one way as the look at leadership is as a trait. So personality perspective, that leadership is in the individual. Then the power relationship, that leadership is a connection between followers and the leader, between and that individual and the group. Then transformational process. This is, Cotter's idea that leadership is a leader of change, that we could really change and influence people. Then a skills perspective, leadership could be, trained, that it is really we can be educated to become leaders. So we are born naked, and we dress up along the way as we grow. Then the last one is component of leadership. Leadership is a process. Leadership involves influence. Leadership occurs in groups, and leadership involves common goals. Now, take note, these are the terms from the definition of Peter J. Northhouse: process, influence, group, common goals. Now, these are the components of leadership. Without these four, it cannot be leadership. So leadership is a process. Leadership involves influence. Leadership occurs in groups, and leadership involves common goals. I hope you've enjoyed our presentation. Thank you for watching from the start to the end. Again, this is Herminio. If you're new, subscribe, like, comments, share this video, and hit the notification bell, choose all. And again, bye-bye, and hope to see you again in the next presentation.